Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Volume 4 of the Scarlatti Sonata ESCAPADE. We really haven't done one of these in a while, and I think it's time for another. And this particular sonata is K105. I think it's in G major, but I don't pay much attention to those things. It's K105, and it was recommended by one of you. And in fact, the person who recommended it, who didn't leave a name, like a full name sort of thing, wrote as follows about this sonata and did so really quite effectively and beautifully. He writes, or she, I think it's a he, Scarlatti! I've loved him since I discovered my father's Kirkpatrick recordings as a teenager. My own favorite is K105, which we might as well call Sonata number 105, for its sheer boisterous physicality. The percussive tone clusters sound like something far more recent. No other composer of his time would have dared to be so flagrantly dissonant. That is an absolutely perfect description of this particular sonata. It really, really is. It's ideal. You know, one of the things that makes Scarlatti so fascinating is his emancipated treatment of dissonance. A lot of that dissonance took the form of an ornament called an accacciatura. Accacciatura, it's Italian, it means crushed. And what it means, essentially, and it's really quite interesting, is that you would take, like, when you have a grace note, you know what a grace note is before a note? It goes, instead of just going, bum, you can go, da-dum. That's a grace note. When you have a little tiny note before the main note, that's a grace note. Sometimes it's called an appoggiatura. But an accacciatura is the grace note, which is dissonant. When you compare it to the regular note, it resolves into the regular note. But in an accacciatura, the grace note or notes are played simultaneously with the note that they resolve to. As a result of that, because the resolution is contained within the chord, you don't have to resolve it further. But what you get is a tone cluster. It's what we call a tone cluster. Like when you take your forearm and just wonk it on the keyboard. That's a tone cluster. And an accacciatura was the Baroque contrapuntal harmony way of justifying playing a tone cluster. Now, they weren't all that common until Scarlatti got his hands on them. And he just loves these close, dissonant, crunching chords. And I have to say, they do sound more crunchy on a harpsichord than they ever will on a piano. A piano automatically softens and smooths over some of the tone, and it creates blend, whereas the harpsichord, it goes crunch. And this sonata is full of crunchy moments, lots and lots of crunchy bits, and that's what makes it so exciting. It's really delicious. It's about 5 minutes long, and I'm going to play you the whole thing with repeats from the fabulous Brilliant Classics Scarlatti Complete Sonatas, featuring Pieter-Jan Belder, who is just a spectacular harpsichordist. He really is. Just a splendid artist. But in addition to accacciature, the plural or whatever it is, and I think that's what it is in Italian, with an E at the end instead of an A, accacciature, Scarlatti also does very unpredictable things with changes of key and even with dissonant melodic notes. And this performance is particularly good at teasing out some of the more dissonant strands of melody, the more tangy ones. It's like putting a little spice into the mix, by gently distending the tempo and going back and forth. I mean, it's really very interesting because, a harpsichord compared to a piano is not terribly expressive as an instrument. It's more mechanical. And you can't really vary dynamics tremendously. The only way it gets louder is when you play more notes or you have multiple manuals that you can double like you would with an organ. But in this particular case, you can speed up and slow down, and the key is to do this in a tasteful way that never fractures the long melodic line. And Belder is really a master at that particular technique, I have to say. And you hear it also in this sonata. Listen for those slight little hesitations and things on the dissonant notes. I have my little pinky note. They're like little pinky notes, these little notes that just stick out just a little bit, and they add just this wonderfully pungent flavor to the melody. This is an amazing sonata. So without further ado, let's listen to the Sonata K105. stupendously punchy, ain't it? And by the way, we were talking about previously about cataloging these things. Scarlatti has K numbers. The K stands for Kirkpatrick, not like Mozart has K numbers for Köchel. The Kirkpatrick numbers are Ralph Kirkpatrick, the American harpsichordist, who cataloged all the Scarlatti sonatas in the 1940s and 50s, supplanting the previous catalog of Scarlatti sonatas by a guy named Longo. So you may also see L numbers before these sonatas, but the standard numbering now is Kirkpatrick's 555 sonatas, each preceded by a K number. And this was number 105, and a spectacular piece it was. We're also going to do some more reflective Scarlatti sonatas. We're not going to do nothing, nothing but the, we're not going to do nothing. Oh, that sounded terrible. We're not going to do just the boisterous ones, the punchy, ballsy ones. But I think just to start this series off, and this is only number 4, we should do some of those that revolutionized music of its day, that made Scarlatti such a unique and extraordinary voice. And this was definitely one of them. So thank you for joining me, friends. This has been a tremendous amount of fun. Keep on listening and take care.